Because it's so far away from me.
I'm just going to put it here.
I'm glad this is not a video podcast. They're not seeing where you're gesturing.
Gesturing? Where am I gesturing?
No, people knowing you, I'm just going to put it here. Shove it up here.
Okay.
Give it a little twist.
Okay.
Sit and spin.
Okay. You did that. I didn't do any of this.
I saw it.
No, you didn't. You didn't see shit. Let's be honest.
I wear these glasses for a reason. I can see everything.
Oh my god.
No, he didn't actually.
You couldn't see which driveway to pull into. You were parked at the neighbor's house.
Fuck you. There was someone barreling down on me.
I know when people get to a certain age that driving at night becomes, not always the best option. And speaking of people of a certain age...
I knew you were going to seamlessly work that in.
Oh, that transition has no scars. Our dearly departed senatress, Dianne Feinstein.
Is that the proper...
Senatrix? I don't know.
Oh, is she non-binary now? Was she non-binary before she passed? I didn't realize that.
She transitioned into the afterlife. We were just... First of all, I'm mad in a very deeply self-interested way. Because
what else is new?
Because I was putting together a piece, and because of my own fucking laziness, I was putting together a piece saying that she should run for president. And now, because I was talking about, we shouldn't have term limits, and we really should just let these people debase themselves year after year after year, term after term, until they're all like Strom Thurmond's age and just drooling. Because that's what we deserve in this diseased country. And now that piece is going to be a lot less funny because she actually died. Because her being still alive, it was still there was still something there.
But couldn't it still be funny? I mean, someone can be elected in the afterlife, theoretically.
This Jonathan Swift thing just got a whole lot more difficult.
Just saying.
It's an immodest proposal. But maybe she can at least win the election for Speaker of the House. Maybe your friend Kevin McCarthy, your boy, the Bakersfield Flash.
Why is he I'm not even from here.
I remember a tweet talking about Kevin. This is years ago, and it was the Dick Nixon parody account, who I love. It's one of my favorite accounts.
How do you remember tweets from years ago? I don't understand.
Because I'm mentally ill, that's why. I don't remember things that are important, but I remember tweets from 8 years back where he called Kevin McCarthy a grinning...
He doesn't remember my birthday, but he remembers tweets from... I'm just kidding.
It's March something.
I'm just kidding.
It's March something. He called Kevin McCarthy a grinning shit kicker from Bakersfield. And that is the greatest description of him that I've ever heard. How stupid do you have to be to so badly want to be Speaker of the House that you give the people who really don't want you to be Speaker of the House, after those dozens of elections, they kept doing another poll, another vote, another vote, another vote, and then be like, okay, if one of you wants to get rid of me, you can, and then it happens. That will go down as one of the dumbest political mistakes in history.
Well, he made several mistakes, but number one, yes, making those concessions. If you're going to make those concessions at the beginning, you need to come through with your promises. And he didn't. He didn't. That's why, the decision was made, theoretically. But as a second huge mistake was trusting any Democrat, especially Nancy Pelosi. Because apparently he said, because when Gates filed the motion to vacate, McCarthy had the right to, they were in recess. He had the right to say, we'll wait until we come back. But he was like, no, let's just get it over with, because he was very confident that because apparently Pelosi had promised him, the Democrats have your back. And they were like, fuck you! And
and every single Democrat voted to oust him.
Right.
Plus, 8 Republicans?
Yes.
First of all, never trust Nancy. I don't know why we have to teach someone in politics this lesson. And everybody knows this. Everybody in San Francisco knows this. Everybody in D.C. knows this. Never trust Nancy.
Everyone in the country knows this.
Exactly. Her own husband knows this. Never trust Nancy. Number 2, when it was first announced that Gates was making his move, I was like, oh, that's probably not good. I was like, this is just going to be another one of those silly votes or something like that. I don't know if it's the best thing to happen right now, but I have to say that I'm impressed with the fact that it worked. Because I went to bed that night after I saw, or whatever, like I woke up and saw that headline or something that he was going to call for McCarthy, and I was like, oh, it's just fucking theater, like this isn't going to happen. And then finding it out today, I get a text from somebody that's like, you know, a meme. It was like Liza Minnelli outlives McCarthy's speakership, and I was like, what? What happened? Like, did he get dragged out or something? And sure enough, it worked.
My reaction to this is that, okay, I see this from both sides because you have the establishment Republicans and Fox News. Well, let me put it this way. It really shows you the demographic of people who watch what they watch.
Cable news.
Cable news or what have you. The split in how they reacted to this. Like,
right.
My parents, who still somewhat watch Fox News because that's all they really have, were like, oh, I can't believe this happened, blah, 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 blah. Like, this was just so stupid, and how can this Gates guy do this?
Because you had Newt Gingrich on saying this is horrible. You had Jeanine Pirro on saying this is horrible.
You had Guy Benson, of all people, saying how stupid this was. And I'm like, I understand all of your points. However, I also understand the other side because a vast majority of the electorate would feel the same way as Matt Gaetz is feeling. Whether he's doing it for a political stunt or to up his popularity.
He wants to be governor of Florida.
Right.
That's kind of his bag.
He's doing it for self-serving reasons. But the base of those reasons are still to please his electorate, which is what he's doing. Like, I understand the move. It's not a smart move politically because we know how politics works in D.C.
Right.
So it's like, I understand both of these sides, and having met Matt Gaetz in person, he is kind of a sleazeball. I didn't like him.
Many people have said that, and they're saying it very strongly. But I want to get to Trump's role in this because he gets blamed for whatever. You know, see how I get dragged into this shit? That's literally Trump.
I've used that clip so many times.
Exactly, because it's see how I get dragged into this?
I didn't even do nothing.
He basically is the reason that McCarthy has the speakership and told people don't vote him out. But Gaetz is also one of Trump's biggest supporters. So he's kind of straddling the line here, and now Gaetz is trying to make up for with Trump by nominating him for Speaker of the House, which is one of the more insane things. I think Taft was Speaker of the House, but I don't know if that was before or after his presidency. I think maybe he went onto the Supreme Court after. Taft, I think, hit the triple threat of top of executive, judicial, legislative jobs. I believe. I want to fact check that, but there was an anomaly like that. But Trump said, "Hey, I'll take it if you vote for me." Because technically the Speaker of the House does not have to be a member of the House. Right. Which seems like an odd omission, by the way.
I'm going to talk about omissions in a minute.
Unless it's purposeful, like designed to maybe have like some, like, if there is a need for an outside person, that you can have an outside person come in. But I don't... There's someone else who's like the second speaker or something who's the speaker now, that faggot banging the gavel.
I want to bring that up because this is a really big problem.
Well, yeah, because I was listening to Ann Coulter's interview and she was like, I like Matt Gaetz on a lot of things. He has a lot of good things to say and I think he's really sharp. I don't like that he made this decision because, she said, the problem is that you have an election coming up and the Democrats are pushing trans kids, no bail, all these other horrible policies, continuing the Ukraine thing, unfettered migrants, streaming into the country, and all that Republicans have to do is look sane. She's like, all that they have to do is say, build a wall, and change our immigration policies, be tough on crime, and not spend so much money in Ukraine. If they say that, they will have the biggest majority that they could ever want. Just saying the things that 80% of the population agrees with at this point. But she's like, when they get into stuff like this, then people are like, well, the Democrats might be stupid, but the Republicans are crazy, and we're going to go with stupid. So it is something to think about. But I want to get into this. What's his name? Patrick McHenry or some crap?
Yeah.
Like that?
So first
I've
of all,
never seen this man before in my life.
And well, yes, and this is my kind of beef with this, and I found out something about it, legally speaking. So the Constitution does not stipulate anything about interim Speaker of the House. Like, that's just not a thing, right?
Yeah, you become Speaker.
Right. So where did this guy come from? And I found out recently through some legal scholars that this was legal and political scholars, that this was a decision made there was a decision made years ago, almost maybe 2 decades ago. No, it was 2 decades ago. It was after 9/11 attacks. That's right.
Oh, so like a continuance decision?
Yes. So it was a decision made to have a secret speaker in case something happened.
What?
To the current speaker.
But does that mean that it's like a designated survivor?
Exactly, and this is the problem. Because theoretically, if something were to happen, that person who was not voted by, any member of the, speakership of the House delegation, they're all automatically like president if something were to happen to those people. You don't understand what I'm saying?
It's like a vice speaker that no one knows. So apparently nobody even knows, other than this person and maybe like a handful of people, that they're in that position.
Exactly. No one knew that Patrick McHenry was, that's his name, right?
I believe so.
Was the speaker secret speaker until it was vacated, and all of a sudden it was like
Pelosi's
boom.
secret speaker. And then does this fall into the presidential thing of like if the speaker is getting surgery, then there's a secret speaker? Like I have so many questions.
No, this is a huge problem that they just sort of wrote into. It's not even law. It's just
procedural code. Procedural
code of how the House works, and it's nowhere defined anywhere in the Constitution. Like, how is this legal? How is this possible?
They just pulled this out of their ass.
I understand the reason. Trust me, I get it. Like, 2001, 9/11 attacks. Like, we had an awakening. Like, what if something happens?
Well, and
they probably realized we need to figure some shit out. But you can't just pull this shit out of your ass. You got to go through the channels.
Well, what do they think that the House is going to do in the event of an emergency that requires a speaker? I mean, doesn't the House basically get suspended if there's an emergency at that point? Like, they can't convene.
I'm just legally speaking. If something were to happen to Biden and Kamala, like tomorrow,
there's
this Patrick McHenry guy who was not voted in, formally a speaker, could theoretically be president. And it's like, that's not okay.
That's kind of insane, and I wonder if, because of that, if there's also a provision that he is not eligible for the line of succession, and then the Speaker pro tempore of the Senate has to become Speaker of the House, or has to become president. Yeah, I don't know. Something tells me there has to be a caveat like that, because you have to understand, everybody in that line, which goes through every cabinet secretary, all have to have some kind of approval. And I believe if you are acting cabinet secretary, like of agriculture or something, and it falls on you, I believe it passes them because of that. So I don't think that would be the case. But that's for someone above above my pay grade.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. These legal and political people who should be in the know were going, we don't know how this works. No one told, this is not public record about how this works.
I had no idea about any of this. So this is blowing my mind.
When I saw the label interim speaker, immediately my antenna went up like, wait, what?
Like, who?
What is an interim this has never happened before. Not to my knowledge. Like, this is weird.
Okay, what can he do? Let's see. ABC says...
Oh, you're really looking this up?
Yeah, because now I'm fascinated. I've never heard of this. All right.
He's looking it up in real time, folks.
Oh, okay. So they're saying, as a temporary... Mark Molinaro of New York said, our understanding is that he is a temporary steward and he has limited authority. So they cannot introduce new bills until a speaker is elected.
Right.
And he will apparently not do anything other than preside over a speaker election. So he said it's never come into play before. It says if he makes choices that he sees as reasonable and nobody questions them, that sets a precedent.
But wait a minute.
That could be a really problem.
Yeah, if this...
Because if this keeps going on and if they're voting on a government shutdown, he cannot preside over that vote, theoretically.
But also theoretically, if this position were created, as I learned, because of a reaction to 9/11,
yeah,
it doesn't make sense that he wouldn't be able to have some type of power in the event of an emergency.
Right.
Like, that was the entire reason for making this position.
Yeah.
So someone's either lying or didn't do their homework, or something didn't sound right.
Well, apparently the two things he did is he kicked Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer out of their capital. Why I don't know. Understand what the purpose?
Yes, he has the authority to do that. I don't know.
But what was the reason?
Apparently, according to Sarah Isgur, it was sort of a ceremonial thing because both of those representatives had they had multiple offices, and their cushy office, like with the really nice sofas and like you know prime suites,
right?
They were basically kicked out of those into their hovel offices, like every other other.
Yeah, so you basically get these offices where you almost like get to occupy them at the pleasure of the leadership,
right? So,
because when I did the Capitol tour, they were like, "This is so and so's office, and it's really nice because they can just walk right over the floor."
Exactly.
Someone else's office is 3.5 miles away, and they have to wheel them in.
Right, like that's why what's her name, AOC. She wasn't even in like the Capitol building. Remember, because
she was in her office that was basically
is in another building.
Yeah.
So most of them
That's
have
435.
offices in other
535
buildings.
people.
Right.
You can't have 535 offices that close.
Right.
In any office.
So basically, they just kicked him out of the Capitol.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a big deal.
God, if we ever expanded Congress, could you imagine what they have to stick offices somewhere?
Oh, God.
Put in a new building?
But this sort of leads to there's one other thing that I'm sorry I didn't clear with you before we started talking. The Trump thing, dealing with the 14th Amendment and getting him kicked off the ballot.
Oh yeah, that's not going to happen, is it?
So I listened to a very, very, very good discussion about the legal reasons why this could happen and why it couldn't happen. And it basically comes down to very specific wording in the Constitution. And the idea of, because you and I talked about this once before, the 14th Amendment says you cannot be an officer of the United States, right? The discussion of what is an officer of the United States is obviously going to be part of this, right?
Right.
So very clearly in the Constitution, it breaks down an oath that every officer of the United States must take.
To protect, defend the Constitution.
The presidential oath is not that. The presidential oath is something completely different, stipulated again by the Constitution elsewhere.
Oh.
So there are other wordings within the Constitution that would suggest that the president is not considered an officer of the United States.
That's interesting.
So these people saying, well, clearly this is what the framers meant. And it's like, well, we actually have records of discussions where they were discussing this. A secretary made notes of them having a discussion like this, saying that, well, no, this does not bar, the president from basically serving again. They were, of course, this was just to make sure that the Civil War leaders did not become president afterward.
Right, because if they were worried, I believe, that if they're putting together amendments that enfranchise black voters and Southern voters again, that you could have a scenario of a President Jefferson Davis.
Right.
Because he was very popular. And there's a statue of him in the Capitol. Like, he's...
Still?
I believe so.
They haven't removed it yet?
No, inside. I'm surprised what's inside. But yeah, so that's like, he apparently, like, he had a big hand in the building of the Capitol. Like, people talk about, he's evil. I'm like, well, these people are still part of our history. It's like the people want to flush Robert E. Lee down the toilet, and I'm like, you do understand that Robert E. Lee was one of the greatest generals in United States history, and Lincoln actually considered him to fight for the Union, and he declined it, saying, I'm from Virginia. Like, when we look at this black and white Marvel movie version of history, we neglect how interesting history actually is, and how people fought for where they were from. But it's not for just some one cause was noble, one cause was not, and therefore we must hate, So, I think that it would be really interesting. I think that the only reason they would consider kicking Trump off the ballot is the fact that he is doing so well in the polls, He's a presumptive nominee at this point. That's unprecedented in Republican primary history, especially in recent years, because usually who's leading the primary now, Fred Thompson, Newt Gingrich, Mike Huckabee, don't win. So there is that. There's also universal name recognition. So it's a tough road. And, you know, listening to the Coulter interview, it was the Patrick Bet-David podcast, and she said, you know, obviously the charges against him are bogus. The one that I'm worried about is the classified intelligence Mar-a-Lago one. Right. She's like, that's the one that I think that
he's going to get nailed on.
There could be some serious consequences on that, because she's like, the problem is, as a lawyer, she's like, if you get a subpoena, you have to comply with the subpoena. No matter how ridiculous it is, it's just part of the process, and it may end up coming down to him getting a procedural or obstruction or so and so and so and so and so. But that's kind of what it comes down to. Everything else is obviously bogus and stupid, and especially the Bragg case in New York is just, you know, ridiculous, and that's kind of where they're at.
But this is coming up in a decision.
She also believes the cases help him too, and if he didn't have the cases, he wouldn't be polling so well right now.
Probably. But apparently Minnesota is the test case for this, and this Minnesota Supreme Court's going to decide soon if they're going to allow him on the ballot, and they're going to hear the arguments, you know, for and against. So Austin from Twitter, you listen sometimes, so I'm hoping you're listening to this. So go do something for the Supreme Court in Minnesota and tell them to read the Constitution.
Put on your pussy hat or something like that.
Read the Constitution.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this sort of leads into the presidential election. Because I know you didn't watch the second debate.
I have not watched any debates.
I mistakenly watched the second debate.
Everyone said it was worse. Like, the first one wasn't great, and the second one was even worse.
Wyatt?
And it was right here. It was right in Simi Valley at the Reagan Library, and they do the same, you know, horseshit, and everyone has to kiss Nancy Reagan's ring, and it's just...
there was almost like a cat fight on that stage.
Between who?
Between Nikki Haley and Tim Scott about draperies.
Yes.
I was like, what are we doing? These two grown-ass people fighting about, you know, balancing budgets, and Tim Scott's like, well, I mean, did you pay for those draperies in the South Carolina governor's mansion out of your own money, or did you use taxpayer money? And she looked floored. Like, they had a full-on argument about it, and I'm just like, what is going on?
I am so, even though they're both running for class president, I am so team Tim Scott here, because I do not trust or like Nikki Haley. And there's people who I trust and like very much who do, and I respect it, and I think it's because of a foreign policy thing, but she would be probably the worst thing to happen. Like, if you ask anybody from South Carolina, liberal, conservative, Republican, Democrat, what they think of Nikki Haley, I have never seen a politician where everyone from a state so universally hates them. And she is the reason that we have the monuments being taken down. She didn't stand up and say, we're not, right. She said, we're gonna, this is a sad part of our history.
The Calhoun statue.
Yes, and she should have that nailed to her for the rest of her political career. It was the worst move possible. And Trump was smart to put her as the UN ambassador because it gave her some sense of purpose. But no. And I'm going to be very disappointed with him if he ends up choosing her as a vice presidential candidate. She's like at the bottom of the list. That'd be a bad choice.
Yes.
It's bad enough. You know what's so bad about it? She ticks every box on paper for who he should choose as a vice president, and she's so awful that she can't even meet that threshold. So...
Well, she laid into Ramaswamy about something. Actually, they all laid into him about this, and
because he won the first one.
Well, but I agree with him. So we all know, you know, the things being said about TikTok and how it's, you know, owned by China and all this stuff.
Right.
But Vivek, however you say it, Ramaswamy was on that stage, and
that's DeSantis' campaign notes.
They were making fun of him for using TikTok for his campaign, and he said, you people don't realize that there's an entire electorate out there of young people that you're not, like, going after. Right. He said, I'm using TikTok because that's what they use. If I become president, fine, we can ban it. But right now, it's helping me, and he's right.
He's right, and the problem is it's a horrible app. It's a Chinese spy app. Everybody knows it. But no one's come up with a successful replacement yet. And every time we've attempted to ban it, it hasn't worked. They've done it. They've attempted twice now. Trump tried and Biden tried, and both times for some reason that didn't happen. And I don't know why in either situation. But he said, "Look, I'm against this," and then he went on with Jake Paul, and they're like, "Hypocrite." And he's like, "Well, this kid has how many millions and tens of millions of followers? If it's a smart move, if a few thousand of them now know who I am and decide to vote for me, that can move an election in a state. Like that's not stupid.
You need to be making the party needs to be making olive branches or something to this younger generation."
Something like that, because at this point, the fact that you can enter and exit college and they just hand you a Democrat voting form is bad. It's really bad, and it's getting worse. And the only saving grace for the right are these families that had a lot of kids after 9/11 that live in red states and conservative areas and have given their kids either a homeschool or a partially religious education. And just kind of just like the regular American kids, like they're fine. But at every school now, you've got what percentage of the kids are trans, what percentage of the kids are questioning, what percentage of the kids are this, so all the subcultures that you used to have at schools, goth, emo, jock, nerd, all these different groups, it's all
queer,
regular kids and queer. Literally, it's like that's what it's become. And so now it's like it's kind of this us versus them mentality that's being created. There are no individual subcultures. There's no culture left at schools anymore. Nothing, media and stuff like that isn't even designed for high schoolers anymore because they don't do anything. They don't smoke, they don't drink, they don't have sex, they don't go to parties. They stay home and they look at their phone and they scroll. And that's what media is now being angled towards. And so that's not good. But if you want to reach them and you want their votes, go to where they're at, because otherwise you're screwed.
Well, and this brings up another point that I also heard people talking about on a podcast. I won't name it. It was an interesting conversation, and I understood what they were saying, but these are older people, and I wanted to jump through the speaker and say, no, you don't understand. They were having the conversation of there is no politician on either side right now that has a bunch of people clamoring to them, right? There's no one.
No one's gaining ground.
Right. So we've been in a flux for the past decade of going back and forth, Republican, Democrat, because no one has come forth and become a beacon of hope, if you will.
The closest that we have is RFK at this point. And even then, that's a little shaky because you got the left that's coming at him. Apparently, Trump is going to start coming at him because he's saying he wants to run third party now, and that's going to take away more votes from Trump than Biden. And so you kind of got this sort of dicey role that he's occupying, and with a lot of attacks. Like, people said horrible shit about him, and the only thing I remember years ago kind of believing that and thinking like, oh, the vaccine and things like that. And the more I hear about him, he's a very decent man who's trying very hard and just wants to make things better. And of course, politics being the way it is, it's like, destroy them. Same thing with Marianne. Decent woman just trying to make things better for people. Destroy her. I don't understand that. That's such a weird impulse in our political system.
Well, it's that, and there's other things. There's another aspect to this, I think. With technology and social media now, most people just don't trust politicians anymore.
Period.
Like, back in the 80s when Reagan was a quote-unquote beacon of hope, right?
Right.
Clinton, even in his day, was like, before the scandal shit. But
it was like he was this young, dynamic. The last politician...
Even to his credit, Obama slightly.
Yes.
They were these powerhouses of... They got a bunch of people following them, and they, bulldozed everyone else in their path.
Yes. And Trump was the last person to do that. And no one has been able to do it since.
But even Trump didn't actually get it because it was so close. You know what I mean?
Right. It wasn't like a oh, this is like a 1964 election.
Or the Reagan election, right? Where it was like a landslide.
States. Yeah. Except for Minnesota.
So these people were saying, we need this. We need some beacon to come forth from whatever party. And I'm saying, I don't think it's possible. Because we hate and we distrust so much government and politicians.
I think that's why DeSantis is a non-starter, because you have someone who has a good record, they've done well in Florida, so on and so forth. I still have my quibbles with the Disney thing, and I think that they're really going to stick it to him when the strike stuff's over. But someone like him should be leading the primary now. And the fact that he's not goes to show that the landscape has changed so drastically. And also, it goes to show that maybe some of these allegedly dynamic politicians were not that good to begin with. Some of them got by on charisma. You gotta have charisma. He has no charisma. It's not gonna work. And even if we decide to choose a boring, incompetent leader, they're usually on the backs of somebody who had charisma, like George H.W. Bush, on the back of George W. Of Reagan, who had this charisma. It was his vice president. It was basically a third Reagan term, was what people thought.
Yeah,
and that's been our case throughout history. I mean, that's kind of what we do. So there really hasn't been a new charismatic figure in this generation. And the fact that the three people who are kind of running at the top are all over the age of 70 is very unprecedented territory for us, because then that is how you get some 30-year-old absolute monster, progressive, fascist leader to come forth. That's the environment that you breed something like this. When your other politicians are sclerotic, you get somebody just coming from the shadows that you didn't see coming, and they have some kind of pedigree, and they just become this person. I remember when somebody said that it was they went on this podcast and they said they were actually from the future, which I thought was interesting. And I'm like, wow, like they were talking about like different ways that physics change and the ways that cars operate. And they said, oh yeah, and MLK's granddaughter becomes president. And I was like, what? And then you think about it and I'm like, yeah, that sounds like something this country would do. This country would elect someone like MLK's granddaughter just to prove a point. Let me see how old she is.
Not that long ago, like less than a year, I think Megan McGlover was making fun of some video. She was saying, "Oh look, the Democrats done trotted out old Mammy to get on the internet and say some shit."
Oh, here we go. Martin Luther King Jr.'s only grandchild, Yolanda Renee King, gives stirring keynote speech at Clemson. She's 14. And she gave the keynote address at Clemson.
Oh, well, then it was someone else, sorry. She's how old?
14.
Well, he has another heir, right?
That her granddaughter. He has his kids are still alive.
Right. Okay, yeah. So it was one of his kids that they trotted out after some racist thing happened.
Yeah.
Quote unquote.
Yeah, and it's going to be on this sort of... Her speech was about the unfinished work of my grandfather's legacy and something like that. A message like that would win a presidential election. In this country the way it is now, are you kidding me? You get all the Democrats and about a quarter of the Republicans, and it's done. And that's your next leader. And it's a black female and all da. That's where we're at now. We're at legacy acts. We're at that stage of decline.
It's
which is why I hope a Trump child never runs.
Well, like in pop culture.
Maybe Tiffany.
How many sequels have been made and how many remakes have been made? We don't know.
How many models and actors now are children of models and actors from generations before? You've got what's her name, Cindy Crawford, and then Kaya Gerber, and you got Lisa Rinna's daughter, and you got all the Kendall Jenners and the Hadids and all these people. Like, it's just famous people making more famous people that look slightly like them.
Nepotism know no bounds.
We need to talk about political nepo babies. I feel like that's a whole episode.
We have 2 more topics, but I don't know if we should.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Shall we talk about war first and then end on the more light note that I'd like to talk about?
Oh, yeah. So, apparently today, and so whenever this comes out, it'll be in a couple days, I get a few text messages this morning after I hiking the dog saying, Israel's under attack, Israel's at war. And I'm like, well, what? And I'm like, because I've not been paying attention to things the past couple weeks. I just get the highlights. And it's actually been nice. I feel like I've been a lot more mentally healthy as a result. But somehow it still seeps into my environment. And so I look
in order to do this, you gotta. In order to do this podcast, you gotta consume something.
I'm just gonna hit the beats at this point.
Buckle up, Buttercup.
Nothing happens this time of year anyway, other than just shit like this. But nothing happens where I need to be 24 hours engaged anymore. I'm not missing any. No memes are created in the fall. Nothing good happens in the fall. The fall, everyone just goes back to school and checks the fuck out. So it's a good time to disconnect. But I saw that apparently there were some Israeli kids at a music festival, and these Hamas paratroopers just came in and just started attacking them. And then I see grannies being dragged into ambulances at gunpoint, and just people eating food and just being pushed into cars. Like, I got an email for from the Free Press from the Barry Weiss operation saying today was Israel's 9/11, and now people are scrambling to get out. The U.S. has changed their visa process, so if you have an Israeli visa, you can safely enter the United States, and at once. So this sounds like this is going to be a really big problem. And of course, the usual suspects, the Hamas people and stuff like that, come out and they're like, "Oh, but look at the casualties on both sides." You know, the same horseshit as always. I like that Joan Rivers clip that has been circulating where she was like, "Oh, Selena Gomez said that we should pay for Gaza. Oh, that we should stand up for Gaza. Oh, can she even spell Palestinian?" And it was great. But yeah, so here we are. It's been kind of a lull with it's just been domestic politics. There hasn't been anything international in a while, so this is a big fucking deal. And apparently everyone's on alert and all that stuff.
I tweeted something earlier about, I'm not an expert in any means on international politics and geopolitical bullshit.
Yeah.
And I'm not a history buff, so there's a lot of history that goes in behind all this that I am not well versed in. I will say that. So I'm not going to weigh in heavily on something like this. However, all of those people who were called racist when they were talking about immigration and especially in Europe.
Yeah.
Right? Where there were tons of Muslim immigrants pouring into these countries. And we've heard of people talking about, the great replacement theory in certain terms, certain terms. And how the Muslim faith is one that injects itself slowly and takes over slowly.
Right. And it uses things like birth rates and things like that to kind of... So,
when you see video or pictures of people dressed in, like, Free Palestine and cheering in the cities of London and Paris and Madrid, like, you start to go, oh, so those people who were called racist for saying this were right.
Yeah.
Like, these people are literally cheering about war and the death of how countless people. I don't know how many people have actually died.
It's very... And you want to talk about anti-Semitic. This is anti-Semitic.
Right. But this is what so many European countries voted against when they voted in populist... I mean, Ryan wrote it in his book, right? Yeah. What happened in between the time, right? Because those people have since been voted out, right? So...
Right.
I'm starting to sound very conspiracy theory-esque, but I think you understand, and the people listening understand where I'm going with this.
I get the direction you're going with this.
It seems very New World Order to me, and I don't like it.
Right, because the second the Palestinians start bombing Israel, then the Free Palestine people come out. And it's like, these are the voices of the aggrieved and everything like that. And it's like, okay, so why are they shooting at a school again? I'm sorry, what does that have to do with what they're doing? Oh, okay. So it's almost kind of like, I think they're trying to get the, like, IRA, like the Irish Republican Army Liberation. They're trying to get a little of that flavor, I'm sensing. But it's the same thing that happened in Armenia a few weeks ago. An Iranian client state decides to invade a disputed territory, kill civilians, and hold them hostage. And then everyone says, oh, we need peace, and it's against the people who got invaded. And you're going to have the same thing happen now. Oh, no, we need peace. You can't retaliate. And it's going to come against Israel's interest, and they're going to cede more territory. And they always do it. Iran is very smart. They're not stupid. They know when our domestic politics are weak, Israeli domestic politics are very weak right now, Armenia too. They know that that's when you start to act. When the government starts to seem divided, and you've got right and left, and so in the Likud, and everything like this, and the Knesset, then they know that that's their moment. And then they jump in, and it happens every single time. And it really fucks with the domestic politics of a country where you're almost scared to have an election because if there's any kind of contention about who's going to be prime minister or leading your country, then the neighbor decides to invade. It's like if you're, it's like if two spouses are at home and they're getting into an argument, and then the neighbor decides to come over and take a portion of their yard. It's like, what the fuck? What does that have to do with anything? Like,
right. I guess my biggest point in all of this, my biggest question mark is, I understand the people. I'm not saying that I'm jumping on the bandwagon, but I'm saying I understand the people who question who in this world, who on the world political stage has been duly elected and who has been installed.
Yeah.
How much of what we're seeing as the quote-unquote truth is actually the truth?
Well, I think they did away with the necessity of elections about 50, 60 years ago from a corporate level and decided that would be like a sport like any other. And the thinking was that culture would be created by corporations and government. I think after World War II it was hard to do that. I think Vietnam was a good test. Can we still gin up the boys and, get American culture going? And it was like it just fell flat. And so they're like, well, no one's going to trust this government again, at least not for another couple generations. So just focus on corporations and pop culture and just do that. So,
well, we will see this unfold, but again, I won't talk much about it because I don't know the history.
Speaking of things unfolding, you have a story for us.
It's not a story.
It's an anecdote? It's a limerick?
No. It's a question.
Oh.
As everyone knows, because I've talked about it here before, I mean, yeah, I use dating apps on occasion. Mostly the non-sleazy kind.
Muslim singles.
Farmers only.
In solidarity with Israel, you should set up a JDate account.
Oh, God.
I mean it.
But anyone who's used these dating apps has gotten those matches of people who, like, on Tinder or Bumble or Hinge or whatever these other ones are. You get those matches of, like, oh, this person looks interesting, but their information's kind of scant. But let's see what happens. And then they start talking, and you realize immediately, oh, you're fake. You're a scammer. You're whatever, because the English is not English, and all of this stuff.
The English is not English.
Well, I mean, I could read you some atrocious things. I'm like, what are you using to translate this?
No one says "pleased to meet you" ever in real life anymore.
Right.
No one says that. That is like, I don't know
what... Or it's nice to meeting you here.
Yes, I don't know what textbook in China has that, but it's not it, sis.
So my question is, with AI and things like ChatGPT and stuff like that, why aren't these hackers getting better? Like,
that's
these
true.
Scammers, like, you can use AI to
I've heard
to
people
create
have
language.
been using it and creating and in fact creating profiles with pictures of people who do not exist but look very plausible. So, I'm surprised. Maybe it must be cheaper or something. There has to be some financial incentive.
But I understand maybe it's blocked in certain countries, but surely there are countries where scammers exist where you can get on ChatGPT, which is free, and create dialogue, with someone. Like, you can create meaningful dialogue.
That's a good point. I'm surprised that no one has used ChatGPT for telemarketing scams. Like, because you can do voices and stuff now, so you could actually have a full conversation with somebody and they might not even know it's fake.
Well, they might be doing that for telemarketing, but for these dating sites, like, if you really want someone to, fall for you and give you money, you gotta give me something better than nice to meeting you here. Like, that's an instant, like, even if you were a real person, I'm still gonna block you because
Purchase me a cocktail in a primary manner.
I'm a grammar Nazi. I'm not gonna deal with someone saying that shit.
I would love if it's just somebody who's a shitty writer and you're like, you're fake, and they're like, no, I'm just stupid.
Either way, you're out of my list. But yeah, no, these scammers
are getting worse.
They either need to use AI or go fuck themselves.
Oh,